The alien queen watched the crown ignite, and the chosen one was her worst human enemy. The air in the central chamber of the fortress of Kaivas was thick and metallic, a hive of living stone nestled deep within the black mountains of Irion. The sound echoed strangely, as if the walls themselves breathed in rhythm with the ancient throne. And above it all, the crown hovered, not on a cushion or pedestal, but suspended in midair, levitating through sheer rejection of anything unworthy. For 300 years, it had burned, repelled, or killed anyone who dared to touch it. And Queen Zavaria, of the sacred Mothakar bloodline, remained without an heir. She entered the chamber with her shoulders squared, regal even in her silent torment. Her hair, black as coal, cascaded down her back, stark against the emerald green of her skin, cool and slick like the sap of her homeworld. The horns of her living crown pulsed a dim amber, as if sensing her quiet frustration. She was beautiful, powerful, but trapped by the curse of a bloodline that no longer produced successors. Her advisors spoke of hopelessness. The priests murmured that the cycle was ending. But Zavaria didn't believe in endings. She believed in battle, and that was why she had made an impossible request: bring her a human. Across the complex, chained to a living wall and shackled by magnetic claws, was Jared Walsh, former officer of the United States Space Force. A man shaped by war, unshaven, scarred along his left side, with the look of someone who had watched friends die on worlds where gravity alone could crush a man. He'd been captured 2 weeks earlier during an ambush in the forests of Damar 7, after his ship went down on a recon mission. He understood little of the aliens' guttural language, but he could read their eyes. Eyes that said, "You're inferior, you're an animal, you shouldn't be alive." His cell reeked of iron and moss, but there was something else, a presence. Whenever the queen passed, the air changed. Something in him pulled back, and something more primal stretched toward her. Zavaria hadn't spoken to him. Not yet, but she watched, as if searching for something. On the 7th full moon of the green cycle, the priests once again performed the ritual of the ancestral crown. Once again, warriors of noble bloodlines, master tacticians, and high counselors were invited to touch the relic. And once again, the crown rejected them all, like a wound spitting out poison. Zavaria didn't scream, but her eyes, dark as wet coal, turned slowly toward the lower entrance of the hall. Bring the human prisoner. The murmurs were instant, thinly veiled insults, gasps of disbelief, open protest, but no one defied a queen, especially not a queen whose soul burned like fire. Jared was brought in, dirty, bruised, still wearing the torn remains of his Nevada base uniform. His eyes scanned the hall for a way out, but found only her, that towering green woman with a crown of horns and a gaze like a predator's. "You want to kill me or run tests on me?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. She didn't respond. She simply raised her hand. The magnetic lock released. Jared felt the weight of false freedom. It was clear, if he ran, he'd be dead within 10 steps. But what happened next? No one, not even the old gods, could have seen coming. Zavaria pointed to the center of the hall. The crown hovered above an invisible pedestal, spinning gently like a forgotten planet. "Go," she said, her voice rough but clear, in English. Jared blinked. "What? Go. Touch it." The entire hall fell silent. The stone ravens on the columns froze. Even the throne seemed to tremble. Jared stepped forward slowly. Every instinct screamed not to, but something about her strange curiosity, held him, like this moment was bigger than he was. He reached out. When his fingers brushed the surface of the crown, it didn't burn. It didn't push him back. Didn't explode. Didn't shriek. It glowed. A golden light, like a sunrise this world had never seen. The hall erupted in chaos. Priests fainted. Guards drew their weapons. Zavaria fell to her knees. And Jared, still dazed, looked down at his hand and saw it was wrapped in living light, as if his body had become part of the crown itself. The crown, silent for centuries, had chosen, and its chosen one was the queen's worst enemy. The royal hall, so used to the ritualistic echo of failure, collapsed into a different kind of chaos. It wasn't noise. It was the rupture of sacred silence. The guards, their living spears pulsing blue, glanced at one another, unsure whether to strike or kneel. The priest stood frozen, torn between blind faith and pure panic. And the queen still knelt, as if struck by some ancient truth too heavy to bear. Jared stood at the center of it all, surrounded by stairs, with the crown now floating above his head, spinning in slow, deliberate circles, like it recognized him. The golden light still shimmered around his hand, and though he wanted to step away, his body felt anchored to the floor. "There must be a mistake," someone muttered, a robed elder with scorched runes etched into his arms. "The crown, it's been deceived." But the queen rose, as if gravity had only borrowed her knees for a moment. "It was no mistake," she declared. "The crown has chosen." Her voice rang out like a verdict, and in that instant, Jared understood. He'd crossed some invisible line, and now he was bound to something far greater than he could ever comprehend. The next few minutes blurred. He was escorted, not dragged this time, but with a strange reverence, to a circular observation chamber. The walls were covered in runes that shifted when looked at directly, and the guards outside watched him like he carried a bomb where his heart should be. Zaveria said nothing more. She simply left him there, with a dish of alien fruits that looked like translucent stones, and a wide view of the gray forest beyond. Hours passed. It wasn't until the planet's dawn, when the twin moons aligned in the sky and spilled blue light across the treetops, that she returned. Zaveria entered without escort. She wore no ritual armor, just a flowing mantle of liquid fabric that shimmered like a moving shadow. The crown of horns still sat atop her head, but it looked heavier now, as if every decision of the night had been carved into it. Jared didn't get up. He lay on the cold floor, arms behind his head, staring up at the ceiling. "So," he murmured, "what's it like, being queen of a people who hate you for something that wasn't your choice?" She stared at him for a long moment. "You talk too much, and you talk too little. Sounds like a tie." A tense silence settled between them, not hostile, but charged, like the stillness before a storm, full of static and unspoken truths. At last, she sat across the room, studying him like something she hadn't yet decided was sacred or cursed. "Do you know what this means, human?" she asked. "I'm guessing it's not a promotion. It means you are now part of the royal bloodline. The succession of the ancestral crown is irreversible. Not even I can undo what it has chosen." A chill ran through him. "So, you want to kill me? Or hide me?" She hesitated, and that scared him more than any answer would have. Outside the fortress, the city was boiling. Protests had begun along the outer walls, marked with fire and symbolic blood. A human cannot rule. An enemy cannot bear the crown. This is heresy. Whispers of a coup rippled through the spires. Some generals wanted to seize control and destroy Jared before the symbol became prophecy. Others demanded that the queen step down, and the inner council, far too silent. Zaveria knew what that meant. They were waiting for her to fall, but she hadn't fallen before, and she wouldn't fall now. The next day, Jared was brought, not shackled, but flanked, into the Hall of Echoes, where the royal lineage was recorded, and where all chosen ones passed through the rite of union. A symbolic ritual in which the new bearer of the crown was presented to the living consciousness of the people. Zaveria walked with him personally. For the first time, she looked at him without contempt. But it wasn't acceptance. It was study. As they moved through the corridors of living stone, Jared whispered, "Why did you bring me here?" She replied without turning her head, "Because if you truly are the chosen one, then you'll have to survive this." At the center of the hall, where 1,000 voices from the past echoed through walls of liquid crystal, Jared was placed atop the golden symbol etched into the floor. He felt something vibrate in his chest, a pressure behind his sternum, as if something inside him wanted out, or maybe something outside wanted in. From the ceiling, a light descended, not a beam, but a rain of memory. Thousands of fragments of thought, recollections, decisions, lives, crowns, blood. He screamed, not from pain, from invasion. The collective consciousness of the royal lineage was trying to understand him, or test him, and beside him, Zaveria watched, without moving a single muscle, until, after exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds, the light stopped, and the mark of the lineage, a spiraled seal of burning white, appeared above Jared's heart. He had been accepted, not just by the crown, but now by the entire history of the sovereigns. Yet the people still want his head. And outside, a battalion of insurgents was already scaling the outer walls. The skies over Virion bled violet when the alarms began to sound. Organic sirens, alive, embedded in the fortress's inner walls, screamed with tones like the voice of a wounded god. It was a sound that sliced through air, stone, and skin, and declared the uprising had begun. From the top of the observation tower, Jared saw the crowds approaching like a living tide on the horizon. They came with scorched banners, improvised weapons, and eyes burning with fear masked as honor. There were soldiers among them, members of the Golden Guard, armed civilians, children holding wooden spears. Zavaria entered the room seconds later. Her face was composed, but there was sweat glistening at her collarbone. She didn't show fear, but Jared had learned how to read the fatigue hidden in the rhythm of her breath. "The people want justice," she said, her voice hoarse. "Justice or blood?" he asked. "They don't know the difference." Inside the inner council, the elders were split. Some demanded Jared's execution, not out of hatred, they claimed, but for national security. Others proposed exiling him to the deserts of Karvoth, where he'd likely be dead within days. Only one member, an old advisor named Marlene, dared to suggest the unthinkable. "Maybe the human isn't the problem," she had said, staring down the others with her milky eyes. "Maybe he's the mirror you refuse to look into." But her voice was a drop in a boiling sea. Zavaria knew what had to be done, even if it cost her everything. By the end of the night, with the fortress walls already shaking from the first strikes of rebel infiltrators, she made her way to the private chamber where Jared was being held. He wasn't sleeping. Sitting on the floor, back against the wall, his blue eyes stared into nothing, like a prisoner who had already accepted the noose before it touched his neck. "We have to leave," she said bluntly. Jared raised an eyebrow. They won't stop. Not when they see the mark on your chest. Not when they learn the crown chose you. You're a threat to everything they understand as order." He was silent for a while. "And you?" "Me?" She hesitated. "I'm the queen, but without control over my own people. Which means right now, I'm nothing." The plan was suicide. Zavaria ordered the opening of an ancient evacuation tunnel built during the Shadow Wars, sealed for over 100 years. The structure was unstable, and rumors claimed that subterranean creatures had made the tunnels their home. But it was that, or hand Jared over as a sacrifice. They left in silence. Just Zavaria, Jared, and a single loyal guard named Kale, with golden eyes and a defiant soul. The tunnel seemed to breathe. The walls were made of living stone, groaning and shifting slightly as they walked. Drops of resin fell from the ceiling like yellow tears. With every step, Jared felt the tension grow. It wasn't just the physical danger. It was the silence between him and Zavaria. A silence thick with questions neither of them was ready to ask. "Why are you doing this?" he finally said. After 2 hours of walking, Zavaria kept her eyes forward. "Because the crown chose you, and I was raised to protect the crown." "Liar," he replied bluntly. "You could have killed me, or turned me in. You chose to run with me." She stopped, turned. For the first time, her face wasn't a mask of power. "You don't understand what the crown means to us. It's not just a symbol. It's the living soul of my civilization. It decides who's worthy and who isn't. And when it lit up for you," her voice trembled, "I knew something was either deeply wrong or unimaginably big. And part of me needs to find out which, even if it destroys me in the process." Jared looked at her. Somehow, the space between them had shrunk without them noticing. "Are you afraid of me?" She took a long breath. "I'm afraid of everything you represent." The journey through the tunnels was far from easy. On the third day, they were attacked by a creature with translucent skin, made of tendrils and stolen memory. Jared nearly died. It was Zavaria who severed the beast's tongue with a blade carved from sacred bone, shouting forgotten words in her ancestral tongue. He saw her bleed for the first time, black thick like oil. On the fourth day, Jared started dreaming about the crown. In his dreams, it called him by names he didn't recognize. Ancient titles: the Silent Bearer, the Heir of the Bridge, the Unborn Blood. The visions blurred with memories of Earth, his sister, the Arizona desert, his ruined base. On the fifth day, they reached the surface. It was a snow-covered forest, hidden beyond the controlled territories. Black trees with silver leaves. No sounds of civilization. Only the cold, and the strange sensation that they were being watched. Zaveria collapsed her knees in the snow. Exhausted, wounded, but alive. Jared came closer, knelt beside her. He offered his jacket, even though the cold bit into his own skin. She didn't refuse it, and for a single, silent second, she rested her forehead against his. Not as a gesture of affection, but of shared survival. And it was in that moment that Cale's golden eyes widened. "What was that?" he whispered. There, between the trees, something flickered, and it wasn't moonlight. It was the visor of a combat helmet. Someone had followed them. The wind sliced across the clearing like frozen blades. Snow spun in hushed swirls, but what the three of them saw wasn't nature's beauty. It was threat. It was confirmation. They were no longer alone. Cale stepped forward instinctively, golden eyes spiraling, the heat vision reflex of the Guardian elite triggering on its own. "Three figures," he murmured. "Military. Inner council troops. They tracked us." Zaveria rose with effort, her shoulders still marked by the claws of the tunnel beast. Her black hair was loose, heavy, falling like damp shadow down her back. Jared helped steady her. "They're not here to negotiate," she said. "And I didn't come this far to freeze to death on some alien planet," Jared snapped. "Give me a weapon." Cale hesitated. Zaveria nodded. "Give it to him." The guard drew a dagger of living ceramic, crafted from the bone of Kelvor's ancient ice dragon. The blade was curved, light, and thrummed faintly, as if it were alive. Jared gripped it with both hands, swallowing hard. It wasn't a Terran rifle, but it was sharp, and he'd faced worse. The soldiers approached in a triangular formation. They were tall, clad in translucent black armor that partially blended with the forest around them. Jared didn't recognize the uniforms, but he understood the meaning when one of them raised a weapon and shouted something in Viriani. "Hand over the human." "Now." Zaveria stepped forward, unsteady but defiant. "I am Zaveria, sovereign of the ancestral crown. You are trespassing on sacred ground." The soldier took another step. "The council has revoked your title. You're just a deserter now." Cale growled, low and primal, but it was Jared who stepped forward toward the enemy. Without thinking, without hesitation, because in that moment, he understood they didn't want justice. They wanted to preserve the old order. And for that to happen, he had to die. The fight was fast, brutal, and chaotic. Cale took down one of the soldiers with a strike to the flank, but was quickly dropped by a paralyzing blast that left him twitching in the snow, eyes open and wrists trembling. Zaveria used the last of her strength to summon the living blade from her wrist, slicing through one of the enemies with surgical precision, but took a blow to her left shoulder that dropped her to her knees again. Jared ran, not out of cowardice, out of calculation. The third soldier, the leader, was aiming at Zaveria, and Jared knew if he didn't act now, she would die. He leapt from behind, using the snow as cover, and drove the living ceramic dagger into the joint of the soldier's armor. The weapon screamed. So did the soldier, and Jared felt, for the first time, the hot blood of another living being spill through his fingers on a foreign planet. When it was over, the snow was red in uneven circles. Cale still breathed, but was unconscious. Zaveria trembled, but refused to collapse. Jared dropped to his knees, gasping, his right arm shaking with adrenaline. They had survived. Barely. That night, they found shelter in a cave veined with amber crystals. Zaveria was burning with fever. Jared improvised a bandage from pieces of his own clothing. He cleaned the wound with water from a hidden spring, even though he didn't know if it was safe. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a king. He was just a man. But he did everything he could. When she finally opened her eyes, hours later, the first thing she saw was him, lying beside her, awake, guarding her with the blade still in his hands. "You didn't run," she whispered. "No, and I won't." She smiled. A faint, real smile. The crown didn't choose poorly. Jared answered simply, "I chose you to." And in that moment, something silent passed between them. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was stronger than loyalty, older than desire. It was destiny. And there, in the cold of another world, in the shadows of a fractured empire, a human and a fallen queen took the first step toward changing everything. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, hit subscribe, because there's more where that came from. This was just the turning point. The best is still ahead. The snowstorm had passed, but the world was still at war. For 3 days, Zaveria remained motionless in the amber cave, caught between life and fever. Jared kept watch without rest, retreating only to gather water, healing leaves, and scraps of bluish meat from the bleeding trees nearby. Kale, still weak, tried to help, but his body trembled from mild convulsions, lingering effects of the paralyzer weapon. Jared didn't fully understand Viriani biology, but he learned that the queen's fever wasn't just infection, it was spiritual resistance. Her body wasn't just fighting the wound, it was fighting the idea of being vulnerable, of needing someone. And yet, she needed him. On the night of the 4th day, Zaveria finally awoke, fully aware. She took a deep breath, her dark eyes scanning the cave ceiling, as if searching for a sky that didn't exist down there. Jared was sleeping against one of the walls, still clutching the living blade in his arms. The cold had left its marks on his face, cracked lips, chapped skin, but he hadn't once complained. She watched him for long minutes, silent. Why had the crown chosen him? He wasn't a galactic warrior, not a strategist, not a spiritual leader, just an ordinary human soldier, a prisoner. And now, he had bled for her. Something in her chest ached, but she didn't name it. By the time he woke up the next morning, she was already on her feet. She wore her torn ceremonial cloak, fastened with improvised straps. Her eyes had regained their sharp, cutting glow. "We're being tracked," she said bluntly. Jared sat up. "How do you know?" "Because if I were the council, I wouldn't stop until I destroyed the abomination you represent." Comforting, he muttered. "So what's the plan?" She stepped closer. Her stride was steadier now. "We head to the Hollow Heart." Kale, sitting nearby, coughed. "That's suicide." Zaveria nodded. "It is. But it's also where the last of the loyal to the original lineage still live. Rebels, exiles, dreamers, or madmen." Jared looked at her. "You want to build an army. I want to remind the world that the crown doesn't choose by accident. And I want to show them you're not just some divine mistake." The journey to the Hollow Heart would take weeks. In the days that followed, they crossed abandoned territories, ruins of fortresses long erased from official maps. Jared began learning more about the planet, about the ancient wars, the symbols etched on royal tombs, the hidden dialects buried in folk songs Zaveria sometimes hummed at night, barely aware she was doing it. And Zaveria, in turn, began to see Jared as more than the bearer of the crown. He was resilient, curious, stubborn, and human in a way she had never witnessed before, willing to suffer for something he didn't fully understand, simply because he felt it was right. One night, under a sky streaked with red auroras, Jared sat beside her near the campfire. The heat was weak, but enough to melt the snow around them. "You know, most humans who make it to another planet, they just want to survive," he said. "But me? I can't keep running. Not anymore." Zaveria stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the liquid flames. "My people," she finally said, "were raised with one truth. Lineage defines worth. Blood determines soul. And then you appeared." Jared took a deep breath. "If the crown had chosen someone from your people, even if they were cruel, would they have accepted it? Maybe, if they bled the right color. Then I guess it's a good thing it chose me." She finally looked at him. There was something in her eyes, something that had once been only judgment and was now respect, and more than that, vulnerability. The next morning, they reached the dead borders. There, where trees died standing and the sky was forever gray, they found the first mark of the Hollow Heart, a broken tower etched with the spiral sigil of the Mothakar dynasty, crossed out in red paint. It was a symbol of the exiles, an invitation or a warning. Kale dropped to his knees. "We're close." Zaveria placed a hand on his shoulder. Jared remained alert. He felt the air grow heavier, as if the planet itself breathed slower here, as if something was watching. Suddenly, Zaveria stopped. Her eyes widened. "What is it?" Jared asked, stepping toward her. She didn't answer. She only raised her hand. One of the horns of her living crown had begun to glow. The crown was reacting to something. From the dead earth, a figure rose. Tall, thin, with gray skin and eyes of molten plasma. He wore an old command cloak from the era of the first crown. One of the exiles. One of the forgotten. "Fallen Queen," he said, voice dry. Why should I receive you? Zaveria took a deep breath. Because I bring the air. He turned his gaze to Jared. His eyes narrowed, pupils contracting into glowing slits. Prove it. Zaveria raised Jared's arm, and as if answering a silent summons, the mark on his chest, the seal of the royal lineage, lit up in warm gold. The exile dropped to his knees. Figures emerged from the shadows, and one by one they bowed. Jared didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. He was no longer just a prisoner from Earth. He was now the breaking point of an entire galactic empire. The exiles didn't live, they endured. They made homes within the carved stone of the borderlands, like the nervous system of a creature that refused to stop breathing. Their faces bore the marks of deserters, traitors, free thinkers. There were former generals, rogue healers, and children who had never seen the glow of the floating cities. And on the night the human was presented to the resistance as the chosen one, the ancestral fires were lit for the first time in over a century. Jared felt the weight of every stare. Some were filled with blind faith, others with disguised hatred, but the most disarming was hers, Zaveria, now more than a fallen queen. She moved among the exiles with poise, but not pride. Her command cloak had been washed and mended, now marked with the symbol of union with the air, a golden line crossing the spiral crest. She spoke rarely, but when she did, the crowd fell silent. And Jared, watching from a distance, noticed something he had never seen in any Earth general. They still loved her. During the first week in the shelters, Jared trained. The exiles knew that if the air was to be a symbol of revolution, he also had to survive. He was taught low-gravity combat, evasion techniques against hybrid soldiers, and mental shield rituals to resist the council's interrogators. Zaveria watched him, sometimes from afar, sometimes by his side. She corrected his posture, interrupted instructors. But with her, there was no cruel harshness, only expectation, and something more. One night, after a brutal training session that left his shoulder dislocated, Jared sat by the central mineral pool, a natural hot spring used for spiritual cleansing. The pain was sharp. He rubbed his shoulder with a mix of living herbs when he heard footsteps. She came silently. No crown, no armor, just her, green skin against the metallic blue of the cavern. You won't fight properly with your shoulder like that, she said, kneeling beside him. I noticed, Jared muttered through clenched teeth. She took his arm, firm but gentle. This will hurt. And before he could respond, she pulled. The pop was clean. The pain nearly made him scream. But when he opened his eyes, she was still there, both hands holding his arm, both of them breathing hard. So close. Zaveria didn't let go. You should hate me, he said softly. If it were the other way around, if the crown had chosen one of yours instead of a human, my people would have killed me on the spot. You think I haven't thought about that? She replied, eyes locked with his. You think I haven't asked myself every night why the damn crown would do this to me? And what was your answer? She hesitated, then murmured, maybe it's finally time to break everything. She released his arm, but didn't move away. The next morning, the invasion alarm blared. It wasn't an attack, not yet, but it was a signal. The sentinels of the dead forest had detected patrol ships sweeping overhead. The council was searching, and now, there was no doubt, they were close. The exiles began preparing for evacuation, but Zaveria ordered the opposite. Hold position. Organize. Jared watched as she took command with a quiet strength that stilled even the most skeptical. We don't run anymore, she declared. If we fight, it must be for something greater than our pain. It must be for what no one else dares to dream of, the freedom to choose who speaks for us. And she looked at Jared. He stood, took a deep breath, and for the first time, he spoke as a symbol, not as a prisoner. I don't want to rule, but if my blood is the cost of change, then let that change be worth it. Silence. Then applause. Real applause. For the first time. That night, the two of them slipped away from the camp. They climbed to the top of a ruined tower, where they could see the horizon, a dark fracture between the purple sky and the dead trees. Jared was wrapped in a thick cloak. Zaveria stood beside him, wearing only her ceremonial robe, her loose hair dancing in the cold wind. You know what comes next, she said, eyes fixed on the distance. They're going to attack, with everything they've got. She nodded. And we might die. He looked at her. Then I'd rather die here than in any prison on earth. She turned her face, slowly. And then she did it. She touched his face with the tips of her fingers. Her touch was cold, but the gesture was warm, almost human. Jared looked into her eyes for a long moment. And then, without urgency or tension, he kissed her. Slow, steady, silent. It wasn't wild passion. It wasn't a spark. It was something rarer and stronger. Acceptance. The next day, the satellites confirmed what everyone feared. An entire fleet of Council warships was on its way. They'd arrive in 5 days. But for Jared and Zaveria, the war had already begun. The ground shook, not like a natural earthquake, more like a sentence approaching. The hum of the Council ships echoed in the gray skies like metallic thunder, each pulse of propulsion pounding like war drums. Snow began falling harder, as if the planet itself were trying to hide its children before the massacre. In the heart of the rebel base, Jared strapped on a set of black-plated light armor lent by the exiles. It wasn't made for a human, but it fit. The golden sigil of the royal lineage glowed over his chest. Bold, visible, both shield and target. Zaveria stood at his side, ready for war. The horned crown pulsed with ancient energy, and her armor shimmered in deep blue, as if night itself had cloaked her. Her face showed no fear, but her eyes were more human than ever. You ready? She asked, never looking away from the sky. No, Jared said, but I'm going anyway. She turned to him. A faint, almost invisible smile touched her lips. That's the right answer. The first impact hit the southern flank. The defense towers collapsed in silence, disintegrated by orbital cannons. But the exiles were ready. They rushed to the trenches carved into the stone, tossing grenades of living light and raising magnetic shields at the outer gates. Jared ran with them, not as a symbol, but as a soldier. Kale, recovered enough to fight, led the front line with fury. And above them all, one colossal ship hovered, the Council's hammer. That was where the true enemy waited. Zaveria climbed the command platform, and Jared followed her. It was time to face fate head-on. A holographic transmission from the enemy's ship flickered before them. The face of a man appeared. White eyes, golden skin, and a cold expression. General Ronthor, the Council's executioner. Deposed queen. Defiled human, he sneered. This is the end of your delusions. Zaveria stepped forward. The end will be yours if you dare set foot on this soil. The Council has decided, and the blood of your line will purify the crown. The feed cut off. Seconds later, the gates exploded. The battle spread like fire. Council troops descended in perfect columns, their helmets reflecting the dim cavern light. Each one looked like a specter. Their weapons blazed with blue and red light. The walls crumbled. The ground cracked. Jared fought at Zaveria's side, hand to hand, like in the old war films he used to watch on Earth. But this wasn't fiction. This was real death. Real blood. He slashed, struck, survived a few more seconds with each attack. Kale was hit. A direct shot to the chest. He flew backward. Jared ran to him, but it was too late. Protect her, were his final words, before the golden glow in his eyes faded. Zaveria screamed, not like a queen, but like a woman torn apart. And the crown answered. The horns lit up with insane intensity. A blast of energy erupted from her forehead, and dozens of Council soldiers were thrown against the walls. Bones shattered, armor cracked. It was the true power of the royal bloodline, unleashed by pain, by loss, by love. But it came at a cost. Blood poured from her nose. The veins in her arms glowed with searing violet light. Jared rushed to her, catching her before she collapsed. Don't ever do that again, he said, desperate. She cupped his face, smeared with blood and soot. If I die, at least you live. Not without you, he replied. And then, the ground shook again, harder this time. The Council ship was descending. Literally, they were going to crush the entire base. We're going to die here, Zaveria whispered, trying to stand. Jared held her tightly. No, he said. I'm going to that ship. She looked at him, desperate. That's suicide. Maybe. But you said it yourself. If I was chosen, maybe it's because I have to do the impossible. The operation was fast. Jared grabbed one of the exile infiltration pods, a single-person capsule, No weapons, no shields, just thrust and luck. He climbed in, closed his eyes, and launched. The pod sliced through the sky like an arrow. It was hit, jolted, but not destroyed. When it slammed into the council ship's hull, Jared was already bleeding. But he was alive. And inside, the fight in the corridor was brief. He didn't want to kill, but he did. He survived 2 guards with quick, brutal strikes, took a pulse grenade, and ran for the ship's core. There it was, the gravity control module, the heart of the beast. Jared placed the grenade against it and armed it. "The blood you want is mine," he murmured, "but you won't erase the future." And then he smiled. The blast didn't destroy the ship, but the gravity collapsed. The vessel fell, slowly, spiraling like a leaf. The soldiers fled. The fleet retreated. And in the center clearing of the rebel base, where Xaveria stood with frozen tears in her eyes, she saw the sky tear open with fire and silence. "Jared," she whispered, and for a moment, she thought she had lost him. But then, from the smoke, a smaller pod crashed down like a meteor. The hatch opened. He stumbled out, covered in soot. Alive. She ran to him, and there, amid the wreckage, she held him like he was her only home. And so, the impossible happened. The Empire fell to its knees before a human, and the woman who chose to love him. The silence after the war wasn't peace. It was mourning. For hours, the ashes fell like black snow over the cracked ground of the dead fronts. The carved structures were in ruins, some unrecognizable. The communication crystals had melted from the heat of the ship's fall, and the northern tunnels had collapsed completely. Of the 200 exiles, less than half survived. Jared walked among the wreckage, one arm bandaged, the other leaning on a makeshift staff. His eyes were sunken, but alive. He wasn't searching for enemies anymore. He was searching for friends, for comrades. Bodies were gathered in silent rows. Among them, Kale. Those golden eyes were closed forever now, but Jared knelt beside him in silence. There were words that didn't need to be spoken aloud. The Guardian would die as a symbol of loyalty, of courage, and Jared would make sure his name was remembered. Later, inside what was left of the ceremonial chamber, Xaveria sat alone. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers intertwined. The horned crown sat on a shattered pedestal. For the first time, she had removed it by her own will. Jared entered quietly, his steps crunching over broken stone. She heard him, but didn't turn. "They'll come back," she said softly. "Maybe," he replied, stepping closer. "But not today." Silence. He sat beside her. Neither spoke for minutes. There, among the shadows of a throne that never truly was, time felt different. "You lost everything," he finally said. "I lost an empire before I ever learned how to rule it," she murmured. "And still, something in me refuses to give up." He looked at her. "That's called hope." She turned her face toward him, her black eyes locking with his. "Do you still see me as a queen?" Jared hesitated for a moment. "No," he said, honest. "Now I see you as something far more dangerous." Dangerous. Real. The next morning, the remaining exiles began raising simple tents in the clearing center. There were no more bases, no towers, but there were survivors. And where there are survivors, there is structure. Xaveria climbed a darkened rock and addressed them. "No mantle, no crown. I don't want to be called queen anymore," she said. "Not now. Because if this world is to be reborn, let it be by all our hands, not the decisions of a single voice." There were murmurs among the exiles, and then applause. Jared, standing among them, smiled. For the first time since the fall of the ship, he truly smiled. That night, a fire was lit in the center of the clearing. This time, it wasn't a warning. It wasn't a call to arms. It was a fire for rebuilding. Jared approached Xaveria, who was watching the sky as the stars slowly returned. The smoke had cleared. The air was cold, but clean. She wore a new tunic, still simple, still rebel-like, but now adorned with symbols hand-painted by the surviving children. There were flowers, waves, and the golden mark of the bloodline, now crossed by deep blue, the color of earth. He held something out to her, a small black stone with a rough, hand-carved symbol. "I didn't have time to make a real medallion," he said, "but maybe this is enough." She took it, looked at it, and smiled. The the purest smile he'd ever seen on her. "It's enough," she said. Later, alone in an old underground chamber they turned into a temporary shelter. Jared was cleaning his wounds with her help. The two sat side by side, a bowl of warm water between them. "Have you ever thought about going back to Earth?" she asked, like someone testing the ground before taking another step. Jared ran his fingers across the mark on his chest, still glowing faintly. "No, I think I stopped belonging there the day I was captured. Or maybe I never really belonged." She turned slightly. "And here?" He looked at her. "I don't belong here either. But with you, I think I can build something." Zavaria didn't answer with words. She simply leaned in, and the kiss they shared wasn't urgent. It wasn't tense. It was relief, a silent commitment. There was nothing left to say. Yes, the Empire lay in ruins. But what would be born next would have roots deeper than any bloodline. Time on Kelvor was measured by the lights in the sky. Moons danced in parallel rotation with the sun, and stars changed color with the seasons. The war was part of the past now, though its scars remained, on faces, in fields, in memory. Months had passed since the fall of the Council at the border, and though the great planets of the Empire had not yet bowed, something had changed. There's silence. No new offensives. No decrees of purification. As if the Empire itself was waiting to see what this would become. And what was born here wasn't a new throne. It was a new home. Jared now walked without a limp. His wounds had healed, though some had left raised scars. He accepted them. They told a story better than words ever could. In the central clearing, where once there were only bodies and fire, now stood a circular structure made of black stone and amber glass. It wasn't a temple or a palace. It was an open assembly. Inside, voices crossed freely. Exiled Virians, representatives of once rival clans, and even two humans, Jared and a pilot who had arrived from Earth weeks earlier after catching the echo of the gravity burst. The pilot explained that, on Jared's home planet, his disappearance had been filed away as missing in action. But now, rumors were spreading. About a human who touched a living crown and survived. About an alien who wasn't an enemy, nor a monster, nor a myth, but a companion. Zavaria refused the title of queen until the very end. Among the rebels, she was simply Zev now. But no one treated her as anything less than what she truly was. The leader who survived. The woman who shattered a centuries-old bloodline to let something new exist. And even without a throne, she still wore the horned crown. Not on her head, but over her heart, carved into a black stone medallion Jared had made with his own hands. The bond between them didn't need public declarations. It was evident in the way he listened to her, the way she touched his shoulder when he hesitated, how they always shared the same side of the table at the assembly. Informal, yet unshakably deep. One morning, beneath a lilac sky, Jared climbed to the old stone plateau where everything had started. The same place where, months ago, the crown had first glowed for him. There, he found Zavaria already waiting, eyes closed. "What do you see?" he asked, sitting beside her. She opened her eyes, gave a faint smile. "I see the end of a lineage, and the beginning of something no one can control. Scary, very, but that's what makes it worth it." Jared pulled out a small box made of living wood, carved by hand. He was shaking a little, and laughed at himself. "I brought something symbolic." She looked at him with curiosity. Inside the box was a strip of blue and gold fabric. Stitched into it, two interlocked circles surrounded by shapes that resembled horns. A new emblem. "It's for what comes next," he explained. "It's not a flag. It's an invitation." "For who?" "For anyone who's never felt like they belonged where they were born." Zavaria took the band gently. After a few seconds, she tied it around her arm, and then removed her command bracelet and slipped it onto Jared's wrist. "Then let it be known," she said, "that this new world has two roots, mine and yours." That night, the survivors lit a new fire, not in silence, but with music. Children played with floating orbs of light, created by a rogue scientist. The air smelled of citrus fruit and steeped roots. And finally, Jared was called to the center of the clearing, not as a warrior, not as a symbol, but as a founding father of something that didn't yet have a name. He didn't give a speech. He simply looked at Zavaria. She came to him, fingers intertwining with his. And so, hand in hand, They walked together into the circle of light. No masks, no promises, no grandeur. Just two survivors who chose not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Because the true revolution doesn't begin with blood. It begins with the courage to love the unlikely. Years later, when children ran laughing between the stone pillars that had once been war-torn ruins, now schools, no one called the place Dead Frontier anymore. It was just Kailaran now, which in the old language meant where exile bloomed. The trees had returned. Underground rivers were freed from the rock, forming living canals through villages with hybrid architecture, floating columns, living wood, and solar panels salvaged from fallen ships. There wasn't a single throne anywhere, but there were listening circles, where every voice was heard, even a child's. And in the center of it all, among hanging gardens and amber crystal towers, there was a home. Simple, round, with a window facing north, where the stars were brightest. That's where Jared and Zaveria lived. He now bore scars all over his body. Some ached when the weather shifted. Others he showed off proudly to the village's sons and daughters, like medals. She, in turn, kept her hair long, now braided with colorful ribbons gifted by children of every species. The horns of the crown had been removed, carefully, ritually, and placed in a living sanctuary where anyone could see them. The crown was now just an ancient symbol. Leadership, something shared. On a night beneath a crystal-clear sky, Jared walked slowly through trees that bloomed with their own light. He was alone, holding a memory crystal in his hand, a recording. He activated it. Kale's image appeared in translucent form. The former royal guard, lost in the final attack, his voice steady and golden eyes unwavering. The bloodline is rewritten through pain, through sacrifice, but also through choice, he said. Jared listened in silence. Then he turned the crystal off and placed it among others on an altar beneath a curved tree, the place where they kept the memories of those who never returned. Zaveria appeared beside him. She embraced him from behind, saying nothing. "Do you regret it?" he asked, without turning. "Regret what? Letting me live." She pressed her forehead to his back. "No, but I do regret not kissing you before that first battle." He laughed, low and warm, like home. "Well, we can fix that every night, if you'd like." She turned him around and kissed him. The world wasn't perfectly at peace. Other systems still resisted the idea of unity between species. There were still those who denied that a human could ever bear the sacred mark of the royal line. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the galaxy, new threats were quietly being forged. But none of that changed the one undeniable truth. They were alive, and together. The Empire was never the same again, and no one ever looked at a human the same way again. Because once, after centuries of rejecting every heir, the crown finally shone for a human prisoner, and instead of running from its weight, he chose to carry it, not for power, but for love. If this story moved you, leave a comment. What moment hit you the hardest? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that button now. You won't want to miss the next epic romance between human and alien, full of heart, twists, and bravery. Thank you for reading all the way to the end. We'll see you in the next story.